Alrighty, guys, we are at a minute past, so I'm obviously very wary of everyone's time. So I'm going to just jump straight into it. So my name is Jade. I'm the marketing manager here at Gunnebo, Australia. We are joining today because we're hosting a online webinar just as a bit of an educational piece. So this isn't a big sales pitch or anything like that. This is really designed to provide information and education for people within the industry to be able to have strong security measures in place. And that's our purpose for joining today. So it is a 45-minute session. We're going to aim for about 40 minutes over. As I said, we are very mindful of finding time to do things like this can be quite tricky. So very grateful that you guys are all here on the phone and with us today. So our topic for the session is the significance of physical security for critical infrastructure. It is Critical Infrastructure Security Month, if anyone wasn't aware. It is wrapping up in a few days. So through the month of November, that is really a key topic, really highlighting critical infrastructure and their security and how they can better enhance that. I think all would know that cyber is a very prominent and preventative kind of approach when it comes to security. Critical infrastructure do invest a lot of time and money, resources into protecting cyber, and rightfully so. But sometimes physical security can kind of take a bit of a back seat. So we really need to, as an industry and as a security industry and the actual critical infrastructure sector, really needs to take more of a cohesive approach and intertwine that cyber and that physical to gel together. So we really need to ensure that we're not forgetting to lock the front door, which is, tying into our topic and a bit of our theme for today's session. So I'll stop rambling on now, and I'm going to introduce our two lovely guest speakers. So with me, I've got Josh, who is the General Manager of Risk, Safety and Compliance and ESG at WaveCon. Josh is also the co-chair of the TISN, which is the Trusted Information Sharing Network, a mouthful there, part of the communications sector group. So thank you, Josh, for joining us.
Thanks, Jade. Thanks for the invite.
And then we've got George, who is a senior security consultant and the director of GRC4. George is also the chapter chair for ACES New South Wales and also on the board for TISN. I'm not typically abbreviated because it's a bit of a mouthful, for the data center sector group. My goodness, these abbreviations and words are really tongue twisters, aren't they? Thank you for joining us, George.
Thank you, Jade, and great to be here.
Awesome. So we're going to jump right in and going back to that Critical Infrastructure Security Month. The theme this year was Critical Infrastructure Risk Management, a Shared Responsibility. I'd really like to hear from you both about what that means to you. I might turn to you, Josh, to kick it off for us.
Well, thanks, Jade, and welcome everybody. There's obviously been a major focus of the Commonwealth Government on cybercrime and cyber threat in recent history, culminating in this week, as you'll probably be aware, of passing of the cyber legislation that went through both houses of Parliament on Monday, and we're just waiting for that to be given the royal assent. But a whole range of legislative change has happened. There's also some change in the SOCI Act as well in relation to risk and risk management. So critical infrastructure, though, we must focus on an all hazards approach. So that incorporates your cyber and IT threats, your supply chain, it's your natural hazards, your personal, and importantly, it's the physical threats to our critical infrastructure across the country. So this notion of critical infrastructure risk management is a shared responsibility, and it's got to emphasise that no single organisation or government agency or sector can manage these risks in isolation. To me, this underscores the importance of collaboration, communication across all levels with organisations between critical infrastructure partners and various levels of government, and that's part and parcel of what George and I do with the TISN environment. Success for us requires proactive risk management frameworks that integrate insights and resources from all stakeholders, and collaboration is absolutely critical. So we really need to share intelligence on cyber threat, supply chain contingencies, preparing for natural disasters, building resilience, and that is very much a collective effort. And it's a big focus of what we do in the communication sector group within the TISN environment across the broad ambit that is comms. Ultimately, this theme highlights the necessity of partnerships and trust, and to ensure that security, continuity and reliability of our systems and services that underpin society are not compromised. By working together, we create a more robust defence against these diverse range of threats that critical infrastructure faces today. And we'll go through some of those later in the discussion.
Geez, you're a hard act to follow, mate. You've literally answered very similar to what I was going to put forward as well. And critical is about an all hazards approach. If we don't take an all hazards approach to our risk management, then we're going to set ourselves up for failure. You really need that balanced approach across all those pillars that Josh mentioned. And critical to it is ensuring that it's not just the responsibility of a single entity. We've got to remember it's about the collectiveness. It's about everyone involved. It's all stakeholders, and that includes government, private sector, the supply chain, and even the broader community. So for me, critical infrastructure risk management and critical infrastructure security month is something that we should be focusing on a lot more rather than just a single pillar. It's about the broader risk management for critical infrastructure and the collaboration between all parties that are involved. Really, it's about sharing information, resources, and expertise, and what we can create through that and build a resilient security framework. You know, as Josh mentioned, that the comms sector group in the TISN focus on this all hazard approach. So do we from the data sector group, and it's something that we share in the more broader environment, which is the Critical Infrastructure Advisory Council, or the CO. So a lot of acronyms, I know, but again, it just shows that there's a willingness for collaboration across government, industry, the supply chain, and we really need to ramp that up and really need to drop the word cyber out of our discussions and just focus on security resilience and security framework and an all hazards approach. So for me, this month is an opportunity to spruik that. We've done that in ACES as well at our annual conference, where we had a breadth of security presentations right across the pillars. And it's about addressing all threats to critical infrastructure. It requires a holistic approach, and we really need to look at how do we integrate those security strategies across all the sectors to ensure that all potential risks are accounted for and managed effectively.
So thank you guys for the input there. Let's take away. Something that I've kind of taken away from what you've just said is you're really talking about that risk profile and making sure that there is some form of risk management plan in place and why that's so important. So I guess what would you say are some key factors that must be considered when reviewing a risk management plan, and how can businesses reverse engineer their findings to incorporate that into their secure environment?
Josh, over to you first.
Yeah, no worries. So when reviewing a risk plan, several key factors must be considered when you're thinking about an effective approach. First, it's essential to assess the full spectrum of potential risk for your organisation, including cyber, physical vulnerabilities, supply chain, natural hazards, etc. But know that each of these areas is interconnected. So it's really about a holistic all hazards risk program that you need to put together. Any weak link within that system can easily compromise the other. And we've seen that on a global scale. Critical consideration. Sorry, George.
No, go on, mate. Go on.
Yep. Another consideration is the collaboration across your supply chain. Protecting CI requires all stakeholders to play their part, from suppliers and vendors to internal teams, government agencies, And this means, ensuring transparency and risk reporting, sharing that threat intelligence, and aligning security protocols and response plan across your entire supply chain, and understanding that your supply chain may not be as well versed in risk as you are. So you need to bring them along the journey, especially those that you have supply chain from other areas of the globe that could be facing other issues in relation to the geopolitical threats and geopolitical risk that we have at the moment. So we really think about reverse engineer your findings from a risk management perspective. I know George is going to touch on this. It really involves identifying the gaps, your vulnerabilities, and incorporating those solutions into your security environment. So, for example, you review highlights for a lack of cyber hygiene amongst third-party vendors. We can actually implement stricter onboarding requirements from that perspective. If you see that in a physical security weakness, then think about access controls, integrating advanced surveillance technologies that can mitigate risk based on your risk profile and your board's, your executives' risk appetite. Ultimately, though, you really want to foster a culture of shared responsibility and continuous improvement, because some of the people you have in your supply chain will not have the budgets to do what you can do within your organisation. And that's one of the challenges that you've got. So you really got to think about businesses viewing risk management as that dynamic, ongoing, continuous improvement processes, looking at the evolving threat picture, understanding your intelligence profiles, and working with those supply chains to build that secure and resilient environment you need.
Yeah, really great points there, Josh. And again, it's really, as Josh mentioned, it's understanding what are your specific goals and objectives of your organization. What are the threats you're facing, and really need to understand the assets that you're managing, and then work out those risks aligned with those. Critical, as Josh mentioned, is stakeholder engagement. And that has to start at the top. If you don't have senior leadership buy-in, then you're in trouble. And that's before you can even reverse engineer anything, you really need to have that support in your own organization first and foremost. And I think that's what the CRMP actually drives, is building that confidence amongst people within your organization and broader stakeholders, that it shows that you are actually looking at how are you trying to mature and basically familiarizing yourself and with relevant regulations and standards. It's really about categorizing and prioritizing your risks, and then thinking about what are your potential mitigations or minimizations that you can put in there. So really, to do this, you got to understand the various frameworks that are there. You got to understand the risk, conduct risk assessments, and really perform gap analysis constantly with the ever-changing environment. Because realistically, as we know, all our environments just continuously are changing, and we, as Josh mentioned, we need our supply chains, our vendors, our partners, everyone to really understand the risk mitigations that we're trying to implement and the continuous improvements that we're trying to do through our risk management. And that's what it is. Risk management is about continuous improvement. It's an ongoing process. You need to regularly review and update your security practices and technologies to ensure that we all stay ahead of the emerging threats and adapt to the changing environments. Just in the last month, how much has the world changed just with one election in one country? If you think about it that way, and then how are we addressing that and what are we going to do? So overall, for me, the critical infrastructure risk management is a shared responsibility, and it underscores the collective effort needed to protect our essential services. And that's what the CRMP actually does, and helps play a crucial role in guiding our efforts and ensuring resilience against various threats. So I'd encourage people not to be afraid of the CRMP or think that they're not good enough. Having a risk management plan is the first step in a continual maturing of assessing and addressing threats and risks to your environment.
So just one thing I wanted to touch on, and this is from conversations that you might have had previously, George, just about, like, we were talking about these risk management profiles and making sure that we've got those plans in place, that significance of the OT and the IT, like, what would you say to people who might not be too sure how to integrate those two things, or just a really quick little snapshot of some feedback on integrating those two things?
Yeah, look, the operational technology and information technology environments have in the past been distinct in nature, where the OT systems realistically prioritize reliability and physical security, while the IT focuses on data protection and cyber security. And consequently, businesses have compartmentalized these efforts. Today, there's a convergence that has happened. We're past the convergence stage, let's be honest. And the effective integration of this requires a bridging of any gaps that you can identify in your environment. And it's about bringing your holistic security environment together. It's no longer about building a cyber security portfolio, a physical security portfolio, a personnel security portfolio. It's about bringing your all hazards together at some point within your organization and ensuring you have comprehensive protection and resilience in these environments. So it's a challenge sometimes because a lot of people are set in their ways, and we've been doing things in certain ways for a long time. But we are at a point where this convergence has happened, and the combined physical and cyber security systems and networking. There's a unified security posture now, and this integration allows for more comprehensive monitoring and threat detection if you really bring it all together into one portfolio.
I guess from a Gunnebo standpoint, and I'm not going to make this a sales pitch whatsoever, it's just a brief observation. So our high-sec portals, which are single-person portals, kind of work like that. They're working to bring that OT and that IT together. They're a physical barrier that's a single-person unit, which, makes sure that it's going to be verified to get through. So it integrates that IT perspective to make sure that single contact person is within the portal, actually the person that they say they are before they get into that security area. So it's good to know that, I guess, we're generating products and solutions that are going down the right path that are going to help to prevent any issues or help secure these spaces. So that's good to know. And yeah, with such an importance surrounding that risk review process, how can businesses dissect their risks and hazards and understand their requirements so that they can prioritize it accordingly? Because it can be quite tricky to know where to start, where to prioritize. You do a risk review and you go, oh my goodness, I've got, all of these things and they're all urgent. I would love to hear what you guys think about, giving some insight in where the priorities lie. So, Josh, with yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. One of the key things I look at is it at a global level, bring it down to an Australian level, and then bring it down to a local level. So for me, it's really looking at what are the impacts that I have, and this is really looking at my supply chain. What's globally could impact my organisation and how we do business. What happens in the Australian footprint where we service every single state and territory from a communications infrastructure provider. And then what can happen in a local level from a jurisdictional basis. So what we've been looking at, and it's all part of trying to understand what the threat regime is for your organisation. So these are some of the key aspects that I've been looking at and we assess on a regular basis with our environment, the broader comm sector group looks at as well. So what we have seen though globally is increased targeting of critical infrastructure facilities on a global scales. Power grids, water treatment plants, transportation hubs have become frequent targets because of their critical importance. You've seen what's happened from a cyber perspective with the typhoon attacks that have happened, embedding cyber within those networks. But what we also know is that there are groups out there that are looking at physical attacks to take out key communications infrastructure, key energy infrastructure from a physical attack combined with a cyber type attack as well. So they're critical to look at in terms of high value targets. Then we have the economic and geopolitical pressures. Every time we have an economic downturn, you see theft of critical materials rise. And we've seen that in Australia, certainly in the communication sector, the energy sector, in the water sector, where you're looking at copper wiring, fuels, diesel, and specialised equipment are being targeted on those particular sites and damaged, stolen, and put into the black market. And of course, then we've got the geopolitical tensions that, whilst they're in other parts of the world, they do have an impact in certain areas of our operation here in Australia, whether it's the Middle East conflict, whether it's the Russia-Ukrainian conflict, or other conflicts around the world. A lot
Yeah, and
of
look,
our
sorry,
sorry, George.
Josh.
Yeah,
No,
a
I was
lot of
just going to
our
add. Sorry,
yes,
mate. I was
go.
just going to add that, and it's really understanding what's happening in those environments and bringing those learnings, and it's key to have those learnings and understand those learnings, and that's what we do through the TISN as well. So, please continue, Josh.
Thanks, man. Yeah, and like George, a lot of especially telecommunications facilities in Australia are remote and isolated. So, you know, not only ours, but then you look at energy substations, you've got your critical infrastructure pipelines. They're remote areas, and they're much more vulnerable to theft and vandalism and sabotage because of the remoteness. And then, you know, from being an ex-law enforcement, being able to get to those sites in a timely manner to deal with those types of issues, even if you get an alarm, or a CCTV issue or whatever the case may be, just it is not going to happen straight away. So there's a whole range of issues around your remote and isolated facilities. But then, of course, there's the ongoing sophistication of threats with the advance of AI, machine learning, learning. You know, the crooks learn just as quickly as we do, if not quicker.
Better.
Even better, because they're sharing information on the black webs. And yeah, the information is flowing out there, and it's not regulated by anyone. This is what you've got with global information systems in your social media world, your dark web, all those sorts of things. They're learning from each other all over the globe, and that makes it very interesting time for us as risk professionals to understand what those threats are, the level of sophistication in those threats. And then, of course, you've got protests and civil unrest that are off the back of that. And leading into all that, of course, you then have insider threat issues. So how do you actually manage your own personnel? You know, your zero trust versus high trust, all the different models that are out there in terms of and those types of issues. And then you can look at, you know, organised crime actually becoming a big part of these physical threats that we're seeing in critical infrastructure. We know anecdotally with things that we've seen in the last couple of years within the energy sector, within the data sector, within the water sector and the comm sector, organised crime is actually driving a lot of this physical crime activity and, you know, disrupting critical infrastructure assets.
And yeah, and let's be realistic. They do have a lot more financial lucrative environment in doing this. So that's the challenges we're faced with, and it's all about trying to understand that and how do we build on that and bring basically all the learnings that we can together and have them in a place that we can distribute them. And that's what we do through the TISN. It's been able to have access to those sort of threats and risks that are happening globally, bring them into the Australian environment, as Josh mentioned, and then bring them into our local environment. And then how do we actually secure our environments accordingly by trying to mitigate those risks? So there's a lot of challenges that are faced, and that's why it's key to be part of various forums. And if you can, you know, get into your TISN if you're not a member, if you can be, and really get out there and understand what's going on and leverage for your network as much as possible to enhance your security risk portfolio.
Yeah, and just to build on what George has said, one of the benefits of what we've done in the TISN is being able to actually look at some of the real critical issues we're having in the physical environment and to work together across sector. Now, just to give you a quick example, in the comms sector, we have seen in the last 18 months to 2 years a exponential rise in the number of physical attacks on our infrastructure. This includes sabotage, bringing down monopoles and mobile sites, criminal and malicious damage to a whole range of assets, trespass, theft of diesel, critical backup systems, as well as copper and electrical infrastructure. Causes massive service disruptions over and above the normal outages that you have within a communications environment. So in terms of the vandalism and sabotage, there's been a lot of work done in this space, and, you know, from understanding the scope that all the key stakeholders have, trying to bring that together as the CSG, as the energy sector does, as the data sector does, and actually try and build this picture that government understand that physical threat is just as critically important as cyber threat, as all those other areas that sit within the risk framework. So that's been a really valuable process in that particular space.
Yeah, and if I can add from a data center point of view, sorry, Jade. Basically, like if you're thinking about the current social economic environment and what's going on, we've had the three largest, let's call them cloud providers, come out and say they would like to. They're looking at nuclear power as a source of energy. So straight away, there's some issues there from a threat and a risk perspective that you really need to start thinking about in your portfolio. Josh mentioned AI. We've already missed the boat with AI from a legislation point of view, regulation point of view. That's very well advanced, but there's quantum mechanics coming up and quantum physics. What does that mean? And people are asking me, so what does that got to do with physical security? No. We don't think about it from a physical security point of view. We really got to think of it from a security resilience point of view. And what does that mean for the broader asset you're trying to protect? Because realistically, if we don't have robust security protocols across our assets and think about what we've deployed, how do we mitigate those risks? If we're not thinking about that today, we're in trouble.
Sorry, Joe, we can't hear.
Can't hear you, Jade.
Is that guys able to hear me now?
Yeah.
You can hear me now?
Yep.
Awesome. Sorry about that. I'm not too sure what's happened. No, it's really interesting to hear you guys both kind of touching on some real life things that are going on, and not to make joke of what's going on with like all the cell towers and all of those attacks, but it makes you wonder, like, I continually have cell service issues, and you kind of think, oh, well, I wonder if that's got anything to do with it, or if there's another underlying issue, which you don't normally flag. I mean, I wouldn't think, oh, I've got bad service because someone's tried to attack a cell tower. But so it's good to hear things like that, and definitely have heard, about that nuclear power being a potential in the data center space, which I can imagine would really ruffle some feathers. So it's nice to hear some different perspectives and some things that are actually going on within the industry that we should really be aware of, because they're real risks, and we need to make sure that we're doing things to mitigate them. So thank you both for sharing those insights.
And if I can add, Jade, sorry, if I can add as well, if you're thinking about where we are today here in New South Wales, we've got what's called a heat wave, and there's potential for blackouts. More and more people are now starting to understand that critical infrastructure environments like data centers consume power. So the threat of potential protests and other likely scenarios to those critical infrastructure environments are becoming more and more likely as people become more and more informed as to what critical infrastructure does. So, if you haven't read it, read the Mandala report that was produced by quite a few data center providers. It has some really good information in there about the power consumption that happens in the data sector world and what's going on. So if you do work in any of the data sector environment, you really now need to start thinking about that as a risk right from your perimeter. It's not just your fencing, so you integrate everything into it, your whole electronic security, personnel security, supply chain security, and ensure you have the relevant mitigations in place. So,
and then overlay the ESG aspect of that, where you've got to try and reduce your carbon footprint in terms of all the different protocols around. So there's another risk to just throw in the mix.
I'm very busy with all the things that are going on. So I guess I'm just going to kind of ask one more question, and we've somewhat touched on it already surrounding that trusted information sharing network and how you guys both sit on the committee and some things that you guys do for Tizen. So if people aren't aware, it's pretty much an industry-led organisation that it's so that people within the industry and government are able to work together to really improve the resilience for security and critical infrastructure. So that's just my kind of snapshot of what TISM is, but you guys are really the experts, and I think that it'd be quite useful for people on the phone to understand what that is a little bit more and understand how they could use it to their benefit, and how we can use other countries' blueprints like NICRP, UK, here to really help come up with some solutions to some of the problems that we have surrounding critical infrastructure.
Yeah, certainly. In terms of what we do in the CSG, and it's very similar across all the different sectors. There's 14 different sector groups now. There's government, there's systems of national significance, plus the 13 critical infrastructure. It may even be 15 now. Our SIAC meetings are getting bigger and bigger all the time, George.
Yes.
But certainly from a CSG, the biggest benefit that we get out of CSG is working with the Commonwealth, working with the Department of Communications and Infrastructure, working with the Department of Home Affairs. We really get a lot of access into federal government agencies, your NEMAs, your ASIOs, your Australian Signals Directorate, your state and federal police agencies, your intelligence agencies. So it really does help you gather the picture of what is going on, and importantly, what is the focus of government policy. And to the credit of the Critical Infrastructure Security Group, they really want, and they lead the TISMs from a government perspective. There's a lot of collaboration and communication that happens within the different environments that leads up into that Critical Infrastructure Advisory Council that both George and I sit on, so that we can actually try and involve industry in policy and decision making, knowing that government's going to make policy and make laws and what have you, but at least we're at the table getting heard about those sorts of things. One of the real wins we've had this year from a CSG perspective, on the back of some work that was done by George and Matt Riley from the energy sector, was we brought a team right across all the affected organisations when we talk about the tower sabotage. When we started talking about tower sabotage and what we were doing and working very closely with the counter-terrorism police here in New South Wales, was actually look at this as, hang on, this is just not the tower issue. There's a much bigger, broader issue. So what we were able to do is pull a lot of information together from all the players that were affected, develop a discussion paper, and in that discussion paper we made 3 key recommendations. Recommendation 1 was establishing a task force comprising industry and law enforcement and relevant government departments to enhance coordination and response to threats in telecommunications infrastructure, and we're looking particularly at physical threats. That group has now stood up, which I'm really, really happy about. And it is a cross-sector group. So we're going to be sharing information and intelligence, and that will roll into 2025. What we also need is a standardisation in terms of the recording and classification of criminal incidents and criminal intelligence when it deals with critical infrastructure. Every state and territory, and being ex-New South Wales Police, and maybe ex-cops on the line as well, and some cops on the line. What we find is that in New South Wales, you might have a young constable go and hit a mobile site and do an investigation, doesn't tag it as critical infrastructure. So that information might go to the owner of the infrastructure, but it doesn't go anywhere else, and it doesn't get collated into a database. So we really don't understand the true impact of these physical threats and physical crime we're having across the networks. And then we really need to think about how we can put deterrent into government policy and into legislation about specific offences relating to crimes against critical infrastructure. There is certain offences within the federal criminal code, there isn't at state criminal codes. And again, a young cop will charge someone with malicious damage and maybe a theft, when it actually is a hell of a lot more than that. And it's a much more serious offence. So that's the type of work we're going to be focusing on, and that's the type of work that the CSG could actually bring together with the support of the data sector group, with the support of the energy sector group. And then now we have a critical infrastructure sabotage and crime working group, which has now been established at Commonwealth level, and will roll all these issues into 2025 with the federal agencies. So absolutely critical that we work together on that. So it's sort of a culmination of everything I've spoken about today thus far.
Yeah, look, and if I can add, I guess I've been privileged. I actually was a member of the CSG in my past life when I was at a telecommunications network provider. So I had visibility of what was going on in there, and then obviously I was quite honoured and humbled to be the first co-chair of one of the first co-chairs of the data sector group. So For those that really don't know, the TISM, like Josh has mentioned, it really is about connecting owners and operators of Australian critical infrastructure with all levels of government. It's about working together. It's about how do we bring the key partnerships, the key people into an environment that really understands their part of the world and share it with government, and then broadly more cross-sectorial, which is something that we in the DSG have taken on board from our inception, and that is to get out there and talk to each sector group specifically, so we can provide information on what it is we actually do, because a lot of people thought the data sector group was just data centers. In actual fact, we're not. So it's a lot bigger than that, and we are not only a vertical as is comms in the TISN, but as comms is and we are also horizontals. So we affect all sectors as two key sector groups in the TISN. And it's key to understand that so we can actually share our experiences across the broader network. It's about providing guidance to government and also listening to government as to what their plans are and how do we work together from a partnership perspective. You know, as Josh mentioned, there's a lot of working groups that are going on. We do have some working groups as well within the DSG. As an example, the recent release of the PSPF, the update to the PSPF, we're trying to put a group together now so we can share with our members what does it mean to them, you know, give them a high level summary, point them in the right direction. And crucial is understanding from a critical infrastructure point of view. If you think about it, the people that work in critical infrastructure today, what training are they getting? What levels of exposure are they getting to understanding the environment they're working in? We're lacking in that front, and it's something that we as the broader SEAC are actually looking at and considering and thinking about how do we lift that to the next level and continuously uplift in that level and mature more broadly as critical infrastructure across the country. And it's about bringing those cross-sector working groups together. At our ACES annual conference, I asked the question, how many people knew that this was Critical Infrastructure Security Month? And the only hand that went up was a representative from Home Affairs. And that's something that we've got to change. It's up to us. We're the security leaders. We're the ones that industry look at. We're the ones that government looks to. And if we don't understand that, and if we can't share and broaden the horizons of the broader security infrastructure, then what hope do we have? Everyone knew last month was Cybersecurity Month, but no one knew that this was now Critical Infrastructure Security Month. So again, it's more education, training, and that's what we're trying to do through the DSG, working together with our other sectors in the TISN, is how do we share that information? And the one thing I will advise people, if you haven't joined the TISN, and you can, it is Chatham House rules. It gives people an opportunity to leave their company hats at the door and have open and frank discussions. And it's about sharing. And if we don't do that, we don't learn. So it's really about using that collaboration to continuously build on our security resilience.
Really summed it up. And my goodness, what is going on with this thing today?
You're back again.
Is it working now?
Yes.
I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on. My computer's right in front of me with the microphone, so I'm not too sure what's happening. Yeah, I think you guys have really summed it up quite well, and it's exactly why we're hosting this webinar here today. It's education and helping people within the industry to really understand, you know, what they need to do, the role that they play, and how that they can achieve that, and the support that they might need. So, thank you both for joining us today. If anyone does have any questions for Josh or George, please feel free to pop them in the chat. But what we're about to do is I'm just going to give both of the guys a bit of a quick little 1-minute roundup of where you can contact them if you don't want to pop it in the chat, but you would still like to have a chat with them, how you can reach them. So, George?
Yeah, look, you can reach me at george@grc4.com.au. I'll post it in the chat. Basically, gone out into business trying to help other businesses and the industry grow through this what's becoming more and more complex landscape in the governance and risk and compliance environment. So we used to think of GRC as something separate, and it was, an afterthought in some parts of the security portfolio, whereas now the whole GRC portfolio risk management is all into one. So we're out there as GRC4 trying to help industry understand that and basically provide solutions for people's assets and understanding the risk mitigations that they can put in place. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think Gavin's just put a question in there in relation to the biggest challenge in OT in our careers, how we faced and what we did to resolve it. A very, very good question, Gav. It comes back to that issue in relation to how is your OT, what is your OT? How is it hosted? What is the potential for IT to impact OT? I worked in aviation. So as soon as you had an IT issue, all your OT went down. So has anyone tried to get through an airport with all the electronic stuff down? It makes an absolute nightmare. So it's really understanding what you can do to protect the OT environment and your IT environment, understanding what the interdependencies are and what you can do in that particular space to try and mitigate those risks. George?
Yeah, look, the biggest challenge I've faced in that OT environment is the lack of awareness. Having people using the same password and the same logon to infrastructure through the OT environment, that they could not comprehend that it actually had a flow-on effect down the broader network. So again, that was very early on, and it was just through education. You really need to have those awareness programs for your whole organization, and you really got to, excuse my French, but dumb them right down for the layman to understand them and the impacts that they potentially have. So the biggest issue from an OT was the insider threat.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely critical. I don't think people still understand what OT means, George.
Mhm.
Even though it's two words, they really don't understand the difference between OT and IT.
Yep, big challenge.
Yeah, exactly. I've dropped my details in the chat for anyone that would be interested in my LinkedIn details, email and telephone number. Happy to take a call, happy to take an email, happy to chat on LinkedIn at any particular time. I've also thrown in there a link to the NIR CRP from the UK. The UK have been doing, it's a great case study on how industry, law enforcement, government work together to deal with the threat across their critical infrastructure. In terms of training and so forth. And it goes back to a point that George was saying. The NICRP in the UK, what they do is they actually train police. So they've trained over 3,000 law enforcement professionals to understand what critical infrastructure is, what you need to look for when you're running that particular investigation. And it's all run and chaired by the British Transport Police. So a little bit different to Australia. Obviously, we've got massive geographical issues, but they've got a whole range. They've got 35 different police forces. We've got 7. So yeah, it is something we could do here. And these are the sorts of models that we're trying to benchmark ourselves across as we move into the future with the working groups that George and I are both working with.
Yeah, and that's a key point. I really like that one about the NICRP. So they're the things that we mentioned earlier about looking at global environments and how you utilize them. So that's something that's key in what we do. So
look, my final 3 key takeaways today: understand your risk process. How do you determine risk across your business? Map that against your CI. Look at the CI risk work that comes out of the Commonwealth Government. They've really articulated what they're looking for. Because if you are responsible to do a risk management program, the government is about to audit you next year. And they're going to come out and look for these types of issues. I was on a briefing on that this morning. More information will flow in the next month or so as that happens. Criticality for communications is that comms is now moving across into the full search environment. So that's going to impact on us as well. Look at all those risks and hazard. Understand your risk appetite. What is your risk appetite for your board? Some boards have a high risk appetite for innovation, but that has a flow-on effect in terms of the other risks that could be then impacting on that innovation. And this is the whole issue about OT and IT. But fundamentally, we all have to work together across the sectors, across industry, across government to help build and understand the risk profile that we face here in Australia, what our businesses face, and then what we can do together to develop the resilience from the lessons learned across the globe.
So, hoping that you guys can hear me all right at the moment. So I just wanted to say thank you both to George and Josh for joining us and giving us such a great insight into the importance surrounding, that physical security element for critical infrastructure. I have also popped my details in the chat if anyone needs to email me or if anyone would like to view Gunnebo's product selection. So we are obviously a physical security company, and we provide hostile vehicle mitigation, building hardening, entrance control, and safes and bulk. So really, really wide product offering that can really create a great holistic and total security solution for critical infrastructure. So if you're ever needing products, feel free to reach out to us. We work with people like George and Josh all the time to really work out what a site's optimal security posture is going to look like. So that's all from us. We've run 1 minute over time, so I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you all very much for joining. We really do appreciate you taking the time. I hope that you've all gotten something out of today. So thank you very much, and I hope you all have a lovely day.
See you guys. Have a good afternoon.